Thank you for hitting play, and welcome to the series we're calling Data Pioneers. We're bringing together the brightest minds in the healthcare industry, supporting the transition to value-based care. We'll be highlighting the best practices, tools, lessons, and advice with a focus on data and analytics. I'm your host, Rich Waller from WellStack, and we're very excited to have you join us today. All right, we're here today with Rachel Weissberg and Joe Zaccaria from Neteera. We are super excited to have you both. So thank you so much for the time today and being on the episode.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. So, before we jump in, just by way of background, if you both could give us just a high-level intro on your backgrounds in the healthcare industry, a little bit about your current roles, a little bit about you, that would be fantastic. Why don't we start with Rachel?
So I always tell the story when I introduce myself. So I've been in healthcare technology, I think, since I was born. My father was a radiologist. When I was 9 years old, my mom was actually diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer. And as a 9-year-old kid, and by the way, I'm not 9 anymore. Obviously, I'm not going to disclose how old I am, but I'm a lot older than 9. When you're young, and we're talking over 40 years ago, medicine was not the way it was today, and it's really scary. You don't know what's happening, and you're a kid and you're thinking you're going to lose your mom. I say this because my mom's alive today, so we'll say that, right? But because of who my father was, we had access to all kinds of care and all kinds of treatment. As I've grown up and as I've been exposed to what's going on in the industry, I've gravitated really to being in this space because I don't think every single person is awarded that same level of access to care. And for me, I've spent the last 25 years in healthcare technology really trying to push the boundaries and find that intersection of where technology can add value back to healthcare and really provide that access. And I think we're at this tipping point today in healthcare that's really exciting, and I'm excited to dig in what we're talking about. But we've all talked about this stuff for so many years. So today, sitting at Neteera, I lead our healthcare practice. I'm responsible for really driving growth within the health systems and thinking about how we take those use cases, how do we leverage that technology to really deliver the best outcomes to the patient care community.
Excellent. Very good. Joe?
Yeah, my background is a little bit different. So by background, I'm Joe Zaccaria, that started VP of Strategy and Finance, but I started actually my career on Wall Street. I was a technology analyst, and I had the opportunity to evaluate Neteera in the early stages as part of an investment opportunity. And I was really intrigued with what the team was doing, trying to what we now call bridge the analog to digital gap, right? The analog human body has so much information in it. And we were starting to really, this is in the mid 2010s, right? We're really starting to understand what the power of data is and how we can make that data smart and how we can gather a lot of insights into things by using the data. But the problem was the acquisition of the data was really cumbersome and there was tons of friction. So when I met with our CEO and the original team back in 2016, 2017 timeframe, they had this really novel way of taking a technology that was not traditional in healthcare, but bringing it into a healthcare market to connect that gap to bridge it. So it's been a really cool evolution to see how we've been able to do that. So I was helpful in raising initial funds of the company, and then I joined them at the beginning of 2018 here in the U.S. as boots on the ground. So my journey's been a little bit different, but I think I saw the same thing that Rachel saw, which was the power of a non-traditional technology to really ultimately deliver the promises of the future in the healthcare space.
That's fantastic. And, I've been super excited about today and the time we're going to spend because, this is one of the first episodes we've done where we're actually talking about kind of the, I would say the device or, the Internet of Things and what could be possible with, some of these remote monitoring devices and where it could go. So I'm really excited to get into this today. Maybe, as we jump in, and Joe, you touched a little bit about on the history, but tell us a little bit about Neteera, break it down, some of the products, the solutions that you all offer, and also some of the types of organizations that you target as ideal customers.
Yeah. As I said, we started with this vision of how do we democratize the collection of data? How do we simplify it? How do we get really rich medical grade information from people without requiring them to do anything? That mission is, I think, intentionally vague, but also I think it speaks to the way we approach the market, which is we are a device and a platform that is connecting the human body to the digital ecosystem in the healthcare arena that's already there. We're just providing it with a continuous flow of really high quality information. Our journey has been an interesting one. In a lot of ways, the pandemic was really instrumental in getting people to understand that a new technology could really help in a way that previously hadn't been thought of. I tell people all the time, my job went from explaining why we needed this technology to educating how it works seemingly overnight, right? I spent like 2 years trying to convince people that there was a need for this. And everyone's like, but we have a telemetry system. What do we need a contactless system for? And then all of a sudden you have this global pandemic that throws a wrench in the sockets, and you have to, people step back and they say, well, remember that company that was able to detect vital signs without having to touch anybody? And all of a sudden, the floodgates start to open, and we had to go through the FDA process and all these things that we had wanted to do, but really couldn't clearly define the use case. And it kind of came to us in that process. And I think we're at the right place in the right time with the right technology to achieve what we had known we wanted to do, but really didn't know how to go about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the phrase that you used, and kind of bridging the analog to human gap. I'm gonna reuse that one. That's a good one. I like that. And maybe as you think about, I know that you're also deploying this technology kind of in terms of target customers and those that you're looking to deploy this. You're doing a tremendous amount of work and create, and it's, which is very exciting, accelerating value within sort of both the post-acute and acute settings. Maybe you could kind of both expand on the opportunities and challenges that are maybe unique to those environments that you're seeing in those environments.
I think I spend most of the time in the long-term care side of things, in the post-acute and skilled nursing, and Rachel's more in the healthcare, so I'll let her elaborate there. But I think what we realized early on was that the post-acute and the skilled lab, the skilled nursing arenas really didn't have a solution, right? We went in there trying to solve a problem that they had, but really didn't have a way of addressing it. Those markets kind of have, there's two challenges that go on. In between a nurse being in a room, you're blind, right? You have no idea what's going on with the patient. So there's that problem. But then there's also if you're checking vitals, once a day, once every other day over a period of time, you may not pick up on the gradual subtle changes, but our system allows you to actually quantify it and qualify it, and then present it in a manner where there's no room for interpretation, right? This is what the data is, and then the clinical lens can look at it that way. So the opportunity was sort of greenfield in the sense where we had all this remote patient monitoring sort of platform that the government was enabling because of COVID or other reasons. So the opportunity was there, but there was no device, no conduit to collect that information in a meaningful way. And then once we started getting in there, we realized that the body is full of all these signals that we were not even aware of. And there's these subtleties that are happening, and to sort of lay that quantitative and qualitative information over these typically fractured silos within the organization really allowed everybody to kind of connect the dots and allow a different level of care within it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel, in the sort of the acute care side of things, I mean, what are some of the challenges and some of the opportunities you're seeing there?
I think the biggest thing that we're all hearing about is really the shortage, the nursing shortage, and I think that that's taking a huge impact in the in the hospital setting. Not only are we, is the ratio of caregivers to patients, the gap widening, but we're also losing a lot of the experience, right? So there's a lot of people retiring out. I was surprised as I got into this space to see how many blind spots there are today. So, as we're looking at different places where our technology can bring value, it's really where we don't have eyes on patients today. And those could be situations like the emergency department in the waiting room, or even labor and delivery where mothers are not monitored post birth. They're really endless. I mean, today I think we spend a lot of time in the ICU and with our real high acuity patients wired up, and getting all this information and keeping track of them and having those right ratios of nurses to patients. But as we get outside of those walls, as we get outside of the more acuity regions in the hospital, we're losing that. We're losing the ability to care for those patients. Our nurses they're not spending time at the bedside as much as they could be, right? They're getting flooded in all these administrative tasks. I think for us in this space, it's just really allowing for this information, or having that access to that data, right? And know what's going on with that patient so that we can just really intervene early. There's a lot more, and I think that as we start working with more and more hospitals, we're learning more, and that's the beauty of this, is we're learning every day. I think the more we talk to people, it's more we're learning, whoa, wait, we didn't even think about that area in the hospital, and how this person or this patient, or it's like it's the opportunity seems to be endless.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
Yeah, Rich, one thing that I want to add there, because this came up kind of recently, is the behavioral health is a really
Mhm.
untapped area, and you wouldn't ordinarily think that, quantitative metrics and vital signs would be indicative of that, but because the system also has some behavioral aspects to it, right, where we can see number of hours in bed that somebody's spending, things like that, they're almost using the vitals as a screening tool for the behavioral health side of things. And it's just opening up a whole new window of opportunity for us within these areas where that are underserved today.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting point on the behavioral health side of things, and I think that there's, on these varying levels of acuity and conditions, there's so much opportunity to collect data. I think that is often even non-traditional, right? And so when we think about the value of the data that's produced by these sort of remote patient monitoring devices, kind of today and then in the future. How do you both think about the value of the data collected, sort of both as a standalone asset, and then when it's combined with other data sources that are available to the provider? Tell us. Let's get into a little bit about the value components of that data. And Joe, maybe we'll kick off with you on that one.
Yeah, to use a very common term, right? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's sort of what we're driving at here, where I also talked a little bit about the siloed nature of the data, and whether that's doctors have all of the knowledge on the medical side, but the nursing staff really knows the patients and their specifics. What we're trying to do is have something that sits on top of all of that provides unbiased information that goes into it, and allows it to sort of take shape and help understand at a higher level of what exactly is going on with this patient. And if we can then look at historical information from similar people of similar demographics, 55-year-old male with XYZ condition on XYZ medication, and we can say the outcome that person achieved with X treatment, we can sort of skim out the guessing game, if you will, and allow a more tailored experience based on hundreds and thousands of hours of data across multiple institutions and multiple outcomes. Allows you to really kind of sharpen your pencil, if you will, to say, here is what we know worked really well, and here have been less good outcomes. But if you can get all of that information together and use machine learning and other tools to synthesize it, I think you can create a really powerful set of information for people to act on.
Fantastic.
I was just going to
Yeah,
add.
Rachel,
I was just going to add. I think, in going back to, what we were saying before is about this shortage, right? And this lack of clinical care teams, with the gap widening, we need to do better on getting more information to the care team and having this data, and having this holistic data to be able to provide those predictives. It's not about providing the care, but it's allowing you to have more information, more insight on your patient, so that you can get quicker to react, right? You can intervene early. I can have all this more, I can have more intelligence, and it's really about getting the right patient at the right care at the right time, right? We have to be so targeted in how we get that care. We want to make sure that we're spending care where it needs to be, right, and not wasting it elsewhere, given that the resources are so small, or the resources are less.
Yeah, and I think that as you take the data, obviously, that you can get from the monitoring devices, and you combine it with not only data that's coming out of the EHR, but things like social determinants and others that allow you to your point, really kind of engage that patient as they need, based on their needs that are not just maybe specifically clinical, but they could involve a lot of other things, right? In terms of where what that data coming together could predict or indicate, to make care pathways more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of data that we're collecting, we're 500,000 data points in 72 hours. Is that accurate, Joe? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah,
But think about
about that.
how much data that is, that we know, and that's all vitals data. It's so powerful. The more data we have, the more patients that we're interacting with, and the more that we tie that back to your point, other socioeconomic factors, other things that are going on with the patient, the more intelligence that we're going to have, and the more we're going to learn, right? It's just this never-ending learning cycle for us, so that the intent is just to provide better care, which we can do with accurate data, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I was really interested how, like, you refer to your product or solution as a digital nursing assistant,
Mm-hmm.
right? I thought that was really, really awesome. A way to package kind of the power of, this not just being a device that's sitting there, but it actually is, kind of can be looked at as a digital worker or a digital teammate. Certainly, addressing the staffing shortage, issue that I think we hear about in so many of the discussions here on this series. That's really prevalent today in both sort of the acute care setting, the ambulatory setting, and so I think it's pretty awesome how you're kind of highlighting that value that you all bring to the market. And are you, I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, are there, and obviously in terms of that value, but are there other areas you're seeing providers and health systems sort of responding to this challenge of staffing shortage? I mean, Rachel, maybe we can expand a little bit more on that.
So I think, well, one is we have to give Joe kudos, because Joe thought of digital nursing assistant, right? So
I didn't know.
It's his
That's
term he
good.
came up with. So I just want to give credit where credit is due.
All right. So, and doing, as I was looking at, kind of, and getting to know Neteera, what I think is really awesome is that you all, basically you refer to your product and solution as a digital nursing assistant, which I think is just awesome in terms of, addressing so much of the challenge that, is going on within the healthcare industry in terms of the staffing shortages. We've touched a little bit upon it in this episode. But, Rachel, maybe you could expand a little bit on, kind of the concept of the digital nursing assistant and how it addresses this kind of critical workforce shortage we're seeing in the healthcare industry.
So I would say the big key is automation, right? And as we're looking to do more with less, we're looking at tools for clinical automation. So when we talk about Neteera as a digital nursing assistant, what we're doing is reducing some of that administrative burden, right? We're taking away some of those tasks of checking vitals and taking vitals, letting them return, giving them more time at the bedside, and then also giving them the ability to operate at the top of their license, right? So people are so burdened with these tasks today that they're being very reactive with their care as opposed to being proactive. And by taking some of these, creating this nursing assistant, giving time back to the nurses, they're able to intervene early, be at the bedside, and really, again, operate at that top of the license. Be that nurse, practice medicine, right? Instead of just charting and documenting, which is, I think, what people spend a lot of time doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that administrative burden is such a huge aspect of, the challenges that the healthcare industry is facing kind of across the board. So there's really high value, of course, there. Maybe, in terms of other areas that you're seeing organizations kind of harvest value or return on investment for these types of solutions or other devices in the IoT space as well. Maybe expand on some of the results that your customers or others you're seeing are seeing.
Yeah, I think Rachel touched on it maybe a little bit earlier. We're seeing the biggest probably positive impact is a reduction in readmissions, right? So the ability to identify changes in the patient over time, whether that's maybe the medicine that they're on is less effective. One of the that comes to mind is there's a chronic heart failure patient who was alerting, and the nursing staff was getting these alerts, and they were able to change the medication protocol, put them on a diuretic, get some of the water off them, and save them from having to take a trip to the ER. So we ran a quick pilot with one of our customers in 6 locations over 2 months, and of the 174 alerts that we triggered, 163 were treated in place. So I think there's a really powerful tool there in terms of just identifying the at-risk people while the clinical staff may not be in the room. And I think that's really, sort of what Rachel was driving at before with the augmented workflow is you can only be in one place at one time. But if when you leave that place to go to another patient, that if something changes while you're gone, you're going to be alerted to, it gives you that peace of mind that you're not missing something, right? It's the, I don't want to say eyes and ears because we don't watch and we don't listen, but it does give you that level of comfort that, if something changes, they're going to be there. And I think that that's a really powerful tool. Another one that comes to mind, we work in some space in the drug and alcohol rehab area. And one of the use cases that I think of, or one of the, events that I recall is there was a gentleman who was wandering around and people were kind of wondering what he was doing, and he was acting very funny, and he got back to his room and he laid down and they noticed a very odd change in his vital signs. So they immediately rushed him to the hospital, and he ended up having something called acute encephalitis. Now we can't diagnose that. We can't see that. All we saw was that there was a critical change in this patient. And the nurse called us, she's lovely, Jennifer, and she said to me, without this tool, this patient probably would have been dead in about 30 minutes. And we were like, wow, we don't even know what we don't know. But it's that power of the quantitative information with the clinical lens of somebody after that, right? We're providing the data and they're looking at it clinically, that provides really the power of the outcomes.
Excellent. And we talk a lot in this series about sort of I would say the kind of transition stage we're in as it relates to value-based care. Maybe what are you seeing either within your current clients, or kind of what are you forecasting in terms of these types of solutions role or value that can be provided, both kind of today and then as you move into a value-based care environment?
One of the things that I think is unique, and we're in, as you said, this weird time and place where we're sort of in the middle of the two Venn diagram circles right now, where we have fee for service and we have the future of value-based care. And we're trying to be this device that sits in the middle that allows you to do the remote patient monitoring, billing tool, fee for service model, where our system says, hey, you might want to go check on Mr. Jones. And the doctors can go there because our system gave them an alert that says they need to be there. But at the same time, that's building confidence in the capabilities that the system has, which allows an at-risk entity or an entity that maybe might want to take on risk to say, look, we caught all of this stuff. Look at all the money we saved in doing this while we learned this under the RPM program. And now they can come in and say, we're willing to take this risk because we have that peace of mind with the data we're collecting and we've shown the outcome. So I think your point is spot on, but we're in this weird sweet spot where we're in the middle and we're servicing both sides. But we're seeing this desire to shift from the fee for service into the value-based care with that degree of comfort that's established there.
And I think that kind of I would say, I don't want to say dual purpose because it's kind of same purpose, but being able to really drive value in that transition environment is key. There's a lot, I think that there's a number of solutions that are, trying to achieve that. And a lot of times you get into situations where, one works well in one environment, but not the other. And it's pretty special that, even this type of device can be really a catalyst for helping an organization move their risk-based contracts forward, which I know is a big desire for many organizations. So that's pretty awesome.
I think the other, I was just going to add to, when you look at care, where care is moving, it's moving outside the walls of the hospital. And in order to fully manage that risk, you're going to have to be able to have, whoever is owning that risk wants to be able to have that visibility of their patient even beyond the hospital. So as we look at going from acute to post-acute and even to home, which we're hearing so much about as well, that's the beauty, and I think that's excitement of what we're going to be able to do, is create that visibility and really understand once you leave the hospital, right? We now know if at your home, if something happened too, right? And we don't do that today, but certainly as we get into the future, but thinking through that, I think that that's where the future of what we're going to be doing is going to go, right into the home.
Absolutely. And I would say, kind of as a founder, having built and helped build a number of companies within the healthcare industry, it's always a journey, right? And so, in kind of the journey that you both have been on, kind of navigating, again, the healthcare industry itself is quite an interesting environment to build culture, to build companies within. So what's been kind of most surprising to each of you on this journey that you've been on at Neteera, or even further back in the healthcare industry? Rachel, why don't we start with you?
I think I'm surprised every day in this industry. I think that what's, I would say I don't want to call it's more of a challenge, but it's, even though you have something so fascinating, you have such great technology, that your technology has the ability to really make a difference. It's just the adoption rate in healthcare and the I guess the resistance to change is hard, right? It's a barrier that I feel we've been doing things for so long. We're touching patient lives. We don't want to make these changes because if we do make this change, it could have an impact on, the care that we're delivering today. But yet we need to make those changes, right? And I think I'd love to see everybody jump on board and say, this is so great, I want to move forward. But unfortunately, that's just not the way it works, right? You have to get these early adopters, these people to think about it and really to champion it for the rest of the market. I think it's never really a surprise. I will say, though, that what has been really refreshing to me is to be part of something that is so highly adopted. So when we do go into a facility, when we are walking the floors and we are talking to the nurses, people get so excited about what we're doing. And I haven't seen that, honestly. I haven't seen that with anything I've done before. I think there's so much more we can do. I think people are thinking, well, I can do this, and wow, they start really thinking about all the opportunities for the technology. I think that's the reception is what for me has been really exciting about being here.
Awesome.
I think from my perspective, the thing that always gets me is when you talk to somebody, doctors tend to have very narrow scopes, and general practitioners are one thing, but you have a cardiologist and it almost feels like he's got a problem that he's been waiting to talk to you about. You have a pulmonologist and he's got a problem that he's been waiting to talk to you about. We were at a dinner with a customer a couple of months ago, and we were talking about one of our features called the inhale-exhale ratio. And he was asking, typically when we talk to customers about that, it's inhale, tidal volume in, tidal volume out. Are you retaining fluid? Is the potential for pneumonia? And then he started asking me very specific questions about the respiratory curve in the inhale-exhale ratio. And I didn't kind of know how to answer the question, and I didn't know where he was going with it. So I went and I asked our product team about it. And when I came back to him and I had a follow-up conversation, my eyes opened, because he said, what I'm trying to figure out is if your inhale breath is short and your exhale is long, right? That's a ratio too. It's just on the x-axis versus the y-axis. What does that tell me? It tells me a constricted airflow, right? And I'm going to treat that differently than I'm going to treat pneumonia. So where I'm going with this is, what's surprising me on a day-to-day basis is these conversations we're having with people who have very specific problems that they don't know how to solve. And our system, which isn't designed to solve that problem, is somehow able to interpret it in a way that gives them a new lens to look at these things. And like, I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And every time I sort of smile and I'm like, how is this one simple tool able to do this and solve so many problems that we can't even think of, right? We don't know what we don't know. We don't know the problems. We're not clinicians by background, most of us. But yet, when you have these people with these very specific problems and you can give them like a really cool answer as to it, I think it's remarkable. And it shows the power of the platform.
Absolutely. Well, now you're making me think about my breath, whether I'm have a lower or higher intake as you're talking there. I gotta pay more attention to that. So a lot of organizations are, I'm sure, kind of at the point right now where they're considering deploying a remote patient monitoring solution or a similar type of product. What advice would you give to them in terms of kind of preparation, streamlining engagement of the solution, and kind of reducing risk? And what I imagine is oftentimes an investment for an organization to move to a solution like Neteera.
I can talk to what I've experienced. I mean, so what I try to get people to understand, or I try to ask them, because kind of going back to my earlier comment of we don't know what we don't know, and it has all these different applications. What problem are you facing right now that is most critical that we can help you solve? And my gut always tells me if we can solve that problem, the solution sort of internally sells itself. So we try to find a champion who has a problem, who has a voice in the organization, who can help us get in to solve that problem. And then it's funny how the word of mouth within the organization starts to say, well, can we use that in our area? And I think about the ED as a point of entry, or behavioral health as a point of entry in areas that typically weren't what we thought they were going to be. There is a period of learning with this, and it's not learning because it's complicated. It's learning because it's a little different, right? It's not your typical Philips telemetry system that ties into your Epic monitoring platform, right? It's a different set of data presented in a little bit different way sometimes. So we have to it's good to run these things side by side for a while, so there's that degree of confidence and comfort before shifting fully to what we do. But I think having creative people with an open mind, with a problem and a voice, tends to be a very good recipe for us to succeed.
Excellent. Yeah, Rachel, how'd you add to that?
So what I was going to say is I think it's really important that you bring all the teams together and you bring the stakeholders together. You bring somebody from your clinical team, you bring your user, you have your nurses part of that conversation, your technical team part of that conversation, and even security, right? Anytime we bring in new technology to a health system, we want to make sure that it's secure, it works. How does it work, right? But then it's also solving the problem. And I think that we need to do a better job of bringing the team together, understanding the problem. How are we going to solve it? What's the impact of the change, right? And ensuring that we have that adoption. And it's really agreeing on what does success look like and how are we going to get there together? Because we don't do a good job of that. I mean, I think that we need to do better.
Yeah, and I think that from what we've discussed here, I'm sure you all are fantastic at helping clients with those success criteria and the things they should be thinking about as they look to engage the various stakeholders and things like that. So that's I think that from what we've seen as well is kind of mission critical, and just getting buy-in and adoption, and everyone keeping kind of the evangelism and excitement of the solution rolling out in place, because any of these workflow or process changes can be can be a challenge if not handled properly, which I think is fantastic that you all have an eye on that, within your deployments. Well, we're kind of mid-year. What are you guys excited about for the rest of 2024 in terms of product roadmap, events, things that you're hosting in the second or the this next half of the year? What's going on at Neteera?
Are we allowed to?
I think Rachel's got the most
Oh,
irons in the fire, so
Yeah.
I say, obviously we're continuing to work on what else our product can do. And I think that Joe, it's with every customer, with every client, with every engagement that we have, we're learning more and more about, what this one tool can do. And I think that that's really exciting. I know that, as we look toward the future of what our product can do, we've been, working through blood pressure. We're getting closer and closer to having that. I think that that becomes really critical for us. And I think it becomes a game changer in this space for, the inpatient settings is being able to get some of those vitals, most specifically blood pressure, without interacting with that patient. As we look at where we're going to be, so questions on, what are we excited about, where we're excited on attending. I talked a lot about breaking down silos. I talked about that before. I'm obviously very active in Chime as well as in the A groups. Not sure if you're familiar with the health tech leaders. I have to shamelessly promote that because they sit on the board, but it is an opportunity. And I think it's one of those things where we actually bring everyone together. So it's not just IT, but you have IT, you have clinical leaders, you have security, you have all of those people together. I talk about it as the doers, right? So you have somebody that's leading vision and leading strategy, but somebody has to get things done. So that's coming in September. I'm excited for that again. Obviously, health is always exciting. You get to see what's new. You get to see, those types of things. Joe, are there others that I'm not thinking?
I mean, the one that I'm super pumped about is this sleep and sleep
Uh,
disorder thing that we've
yes.
been working on for a while. We back in 2019, maybe we did our first clinical sleep trial, and we saw a lot of really interesting stuff. COVID and the FDA certification needs sort of put that on the back burner for a bit while we went and got the proper certification for the underlying device. But if you think about what our device does, right, it reads both the pulmonary and cardiac metrics in one waveform. And so we can really clearly see sleep and sleep disorders and apnea and hypopnea and classify them. And, this is such an underdiagnosed, misunderstood ailment within the populations we serve. And I think if we can get people screened for this using our tool and get them the care, I think the rest of their health actually improves. So back to what we were talking about earlier, that flywheel effect, right? Well, we're treating you for chronic heart failure, we're treating you for COPD, we're treating you for diabetes, all these different things that you're being treated for. But if you're not sleeping and your body's not resting, then the other treatments are not as effective. So I'm really excited that this is coming. We're wrapping it up now. We'll have FDA approval hopefully by the end of the year for it. But what that does is that gives us a unique ability to screen people for something that they may not otherwise know they even have, and hopefully improve their overall health.
That's amazing. Yeah, there's so much predictive power, I think, in sleep, and for all kinds of different things, like you mentioned, comorbidities of many varieties. So that's really exciting.
I, I was going to also add, I think, one of the things that we're starting to get into is the home. I think as we get further in the year, we'll start doing some test studies of how we can work with chronic conditions in the home. And I think that gets exciting for us too. We think about, people want to be cared for in their home. Obviously, the demands of what's happening in the hospital and other skilled nursing are pushing people into the home. So how great to be able to have something that's passively contactlessly monitoring patients at the home. We don't have to worry about if they're wearing it, is it charged, all of those things. I think that's going to be really exciting for us as we continue to explore into that space.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. How do you think about AI, machine learning, in kind of this general area of the market, right? What are you seeing that's interesting, or exciting about how AI machine learning can have effect, again, specifically kind of in your area of the market?
To me, the back to the siloed nature of healthcare, right? All of these things operating in different vacuums. to be able to take all of that data and put it into an environment where it can learn from one another, and we can accelerate feature development, and we can connect dots that may not have otherwise been connected because we didn't have data points from all these different areas. That to me is where the real power lies. It's being able to evaluate and cross-pollinate information from areas that typically wouldn't touch one another through artificial intelligence and machine learning. I mean, our team uses a ton of it in the development of features. We don't use it once a device is installed, it's not like continuing to evolve. But there are periodic over-the-air updates that update the system, based on our certifications. But the team uses it a ton to understand areas that they may not have otherwise had insights into. And I think that's really, we're finally at that area that we've been thinking about for a long time of data and analytics and processing power, and how are we going to mesh all of that to actually deliver what the promise holds.
That's great. Rachel, any thoughts on that?
I just think it goes back to the ability to be more predictive, right? I mean, the more intelligence that we have, the more insight that we have. And it's just this whole idea of we want to be more proactive with the care that we give. We want to be less reactive. We want to be able to respond earlier. And the more information that we have, leveraging AI, I think as we start collaborating the data sets from multiple sources, we're going to be so much more knowledgeable about how best to care for the patient. So I think that's the part that's exciting to me.
That's really exciting. And I'm excited about kind of the, I think kind of sitting outside maybe of the solutions that of the specific kind of sensor or IoT based solution, but the ability for that data to be ingested by kind of AI based agents that are, they're kind of working or kind of interacting with the patients over time, or even with the staff, right, on the administrative side. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of, leverage that as a data input into an AI as a separate solution, but kind of in a cohesive experience for the healthcare organization. I think there's a lot of exciting things that can happen as the output gets fed into some of those other solutions. Certainly have to be compliant, and there's a lot of risk factors involved with that. But I think that there's going to be some exciting stuff coming when you start combine those solutions together. Rachel, in terms of kind of headwinds, right, for the industry, and then kind of for providers in this space, what are you seeing right now?
I think the biggest thing is just resistance to change, and I think it's that we're so used to doing things the way we've always done them, and it's just this resistance to, even though there's a better way to do it, or there might be a better way to do it, we're so comfortable in the way we're doing things. And so it's that really trying to figure out how to get people to think differently. Obviously with AI, the opportunity for AI, it's endless. However, we have to be cautious with the ethics that go around with it. I think that's kind of what you were alluding to as well. We don't want to take away the human element, right? We want to make sure we keep that human element. I think just adoption in general of technology always tends to be hard in healthcare.
Yeah, certainly a lot of challenges there. But I think all able to be addressed, right? I mean, I think with the right combination of people, process, technology, definitely some exciting things coming.
One of the other things too, the hardest part about it is, even though, we're all here for the right reasons, we all want to provide the care for our patients, we're still running, healthcare is still a business. And so understanding how things are going to get funded and having the support from the government. I mean, it is exciting. I think I just read last week that they extended, telehealth benefits. They've obviously extended hospital home for another 5 years, but we need to continue to see those things, because without that, I mean, it's an unfortunate part, right? I mean, that's the hard pill to swallow, right? Is that even though we want to do all these things, they have to be funded. And so we need the help from, CMS to continue funding what they're doing today as well.
Absolutely. So we look to foster a really collective mind share here on the series. I'd like to ask where for you all as kind of key professionals in the space, where do you go for sources of intelligence, information, so books, podcasts, events, periodicals. What do you guys, or what would you share, to the audience on some interesting areas that you guys, use to collect intelligence?
Me personally, I kind of go back to my old school roots in Wall Street. I love reading equity research and thematic pieces where they talk about the future. And, even if 60% of the promise there can get, brought to fruition, I think there's a lot of really, really smart people trying to solve a lot of really, really complex problems. And they all need funding. So somehow these banks always have access to amazing minds and people. And I think that that's a really good spot to kind of see where the world is headed, and then kind of do some reductive things to get back to, what's achievable in a near term for us, and how do we figure it out. The other one is just clinicians. These guys have so much information that they don't even realize, and most of the time they're not even drawing upon it. So when you bring something new and novel to them and it sort of sparks the imagination, you then get these questions that help you make smarter inferences. So to me, I do a little bit of my old school equity research reading and thematic stuff, and then I like talking to people in the space because they're always forward thinking.
I'll give Becker's a tried and true shout out. I feel like Becker's, until Scott will thank me. But they do such a great job of aggregating everything that's out there. I feel, I try my best. There's a lot of information. I mean, you could get 20 emails a day if you wanted to, but I do think that it's a really good source. If you're looking for a one-stop shop, you're going to get all the information is going to get funneled in there. And they do an excellent job of that. So.
That's great. So is there anything that we didn't touch on that you all want to touch or ask, or anything else?
I think the only thing I would add is, for people who are looking to bring on this technology, or looking to try and think about something new, novel, and different to bring in to improve care, really make sure you have a fundamental understanding of what the long-term needs are, not just the short-term. Like, don't try and solve for a problem that you have today. Try and understanding what that problem is going to evolve to be, and take it from there, because there's different solutions, as we touched on before. But I think you really need to understand, if you're going to invest the time and energy and resources and money to do this, really try and future-proof yourself.
And I would say, just to echo what Joe's saying, is we need to be cautious about not spending 2 years to solve a problem. I think in healthcare, by the time we solve a problem, we're already so far ahead of it that we need to move fast. And you need to think about the future and plan, but don't get so caught up, right, in the planning and the thinking and the over evaluating and the analysis of everything, that now all of a sudden you got to solve for a different problem, right? So it's a balance of trying to figure out, how do I move fast, move quick, but stay focused.
That's amazing. Well, I've had an absolute blast today. Joe, Rachel, thank you so much for your time and for being on the series. It's always great to connect, and we're excited to get this out there. So thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in addition to these events, you all have some webinars coming up. We'll post those in the show notes for anybody that wants to attend. I think a Neteera webinar is a great way to get to know kind of the solutions, some of these capabilities that that are extremely valuable that we're discussing today.
Thanks, Rich.